I'm Brian Gilman. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing at Vonage, and we're going to talk today about smart numbers, and it's probably a topic that most of you have heard very little about, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. I like to start off every presentation with a bold exaggeration, but in the 20 plus years in the communication space I've been here, there has never been a customer that has said, your off-the-shelf solution does everything I need it to. It's never happened. It especially doesn't happen in communications, because every business has a unique workflow, a unique integration, some security or compliance mechanism that they need to tie into, and off-the-shelf solutions just don't solve for all their needs. And so customers come to us and say, I need X feature, I need to solve for Y application, I need to solve for Z workflow. And you have two choices at that point in time. You either say, I'll do without, and we'll just not address that issue, or I'm gonna have to bring in a systems integrator, a team of developers, and we're gonna have to bubblegum and duct tape this thing together. We're gonna have to maintain this solution over the course of time. It's gonna cost me an arm and a leg, but it's important to my business. That's what we're solving for here today with smart numbers. So for those of you who don't know Vonage, Vonage essentially has three solutions that we sell into the marketplace. Unified communications. We pioneered the residential VoIP market, and we are a leader in the unified communications space for business today. Contact centers and communications APIs. Why is all that important? Well, when we assembled these assets, we knew that communications were changing. We knew that customers were now dictating the way that they wanted to communicate with businesses. It was no longer just voice communications, fax communications. They wanted video. They wanted chat. They wanted social messaging. They wanted embedded communications. They wanted to be able to take out their mobile app and be able to communicate with the businesses that they talk to today. So we assembled this portfolio to do just that, and it was intentional. But more importantly, we had the vision to say, if we do this right and we have this communications API stack, we can start to do things very, very differently in terms of how the world approaches unified communications and contact centers. When you start to take the APIs and you start to boil them into these other spaces, this is what we call programmable communications. When you think about what other companies are offering in terms of trying to solve for these business needs, they're saying, get a team of developers and we can solve this through APIs. But at the end of the day, unified communications contact center is 80, 85, 90% commodity. Everyone offers it. It's my feature set versus your feature set. But when you start to look at APIs and how we can start to change these things, when you already have the pre-built UC and contact center offerings, you don't need to go and customize and build the 85% that's commodity. All you need are the APIs to go and tweak for that unique workflow or that unique application that we're trying to solve for as a business today. And that's what programmability is doing for us. It's taking APIs and starting to build with very little developer resource to go and build for those unique applications that you can't solve for. When you look at integrating all of these solutions, it's really starting to change the world and how we start to think about communications, because today customers are frustrated by how they deal with businesses. They hate the experience of calling the airline, because they need to change their flight. And you go through the whole thing of validating yourself, and they say, oh, you're on an international flight, let me put you through to Bobby. And then Bobby gets on the phone and says, what's your name? What's your phone number? Everything you just validated, that experience for that customer has been broken. And so when you take these APIs and you take these assets and you think about them holistically, you can now carry that customer in an omni-channel environment without having to fragment that customer experience. So today we're talking about programmability. And this is really important because we're not talking about APIs and building an embedded experience. We're talking about APIs and supplementing your existing UC infrastructure. When you take your Vonage Business Cloud UC application and you add programmability, you start to get differentiation. And this is where you're no longer talking about my features versus your features, and let's figure out who can sell it at the least price point. And we'll deal with those other issues that you have at a later date. We can solve for those very easily and with very little overhead. So what is a programmable number? So today, when you go and you buy a unified communication solution, you get a number. It's my phone number, I'm calling your phone number. It's a dumb interaction between two phones. I dial your number, your phone number rings. And you can, in a historical environment, you could program things after that call for it to do things, whether it be an IVR or whether it be integrated into a contact center. What we're doing is we're replacing the DID, that direct dial phone number, with a voice API. And what that allows you to do now is a whole world of applications with that number prior to the call. You can program that number to do things and give that number intelligence, which is why we call it smart numbers, to solve for unique workflows prior to that number ever being dialed. And we'll give you examples of that later today. It's leveraging our Nexmo APIs. We purchased Nexmo 3.5 years ago. It's a platform similar to, for those of you who know Nexmo or Twilio. It's a communications API platform. It's used by over 700,000 developers. I think we eclipsed 800,000 recently. But what that allows us to do now is to program into third-party applications, so like AWS, Azure, IBM Watson, to bring artificial intelligence, to bring third-party applications integration into the call to once again solve for unique customer needs that they're looking to solve for. I brought up a lot of these before. And so for every customer that has a VBC seat, we're replacing that phone number with a smart number. And all that's allowing you to do is to take that number and to integrate it within our Nexmo APIs, and then to tie it into your application. Did I vote? Oh, that was just a camera flash. And that application can be over a course of any third party that you want, whether it just be a calendaring application, artificial intelligence platforms that could power chatbots or virtual assistants. That could be your third-party CRM application like Salesforce or Zoho or Sugar CRM. It could be tying into other cognitive services as well. And so this is really taking anything that you're using, because for every dollar that you're spending with a company like Vonage or any of our competitors, you're probably spending 3 to 5 times that amount in productivity applications, whether that be Office 365, Salesforce. And so what can we do to help make those interactions more productive and to help make that investment that you're making outside of your communications more productive and more valuable to your business and to your customers? When you do this now, and we've taken those APIs and we've swapped out your phone number, we're now making every call where you can now trigger a number of interactions. So you're taking your number, and that's now going to do things, and we'll talk about those things in a minute. But we're solving for workflows. Like we can now record your call and upload it into a CRM application. We can interact with your calendar to see if you're actually, when that phone call comes into you, as to whether or not you're busy. And if you are busy in a meeting, we can preface that call with an IVR which says, Brian's busy now. His next available appointment is at 4 o'clock. Would you like to book that? So now think about it. The customer experience, or even my colleagues, they go to call me. They're no longer just getting my voicemail. They're getting an interactive response which says, I'm not free right now, but here's an option for when he's free next. So you're not going to call me a half hour from now and you get that same experience. It's giving you an available time. It's asking you if you'd like to book that time. And if you book that time, my calendar will populate with your phone number, and I know to call you back at 4 o'clock. Voice or messaging bot, and we'll talk about this later, but you can now interact with some of those third-party AI applications to provide intelligence so that you're dealing with an interactive bot to solve for those needs, and once again, not being pawned off into a random IVR or into your voicemail. Throughout the course of a day, we talked about workflows, and every company has a workflow. But if you start to think about all of the places where smart numbers or intelligence can be brought into a customer interaction, this is a day in the life of a customer. So let's think first time I'm driving into a virtual agent. I call the business number, and I get a virtual assistant. That virtual assistant will help me answer questions without having to be put through to a person, or at least get me to the right person. I can have contextual routing. We talked about somebody calling a specific person, that person not being available. I now have the ability to set up a calendar invite, or send them a text message, or send them an email finding my next available time. I can check my calendar to see if I'm available. Record a call if we get it live. Send a follow-up, and so we can automatically send a follow-up message. So think about doctor's offices. One of the primary challenges that doctors face today are missed appointments. And so what can I do to make sure that person gets followed up upon? It can check calendars, and it can send an automatic SMS to a patient saying, you have an appointment in 24 hours. Are you still going to come to that appointment? Yes or no? I now know you're coming. If you're not coming, I can go and backfill you with somebody else who wanted an earlier appointment. And then book a follow-up through a voice assistant. These are just a couple of examples, but we're dealing with APIs. This is when we say dream it, build it, we mean that very literally. Customers today are building with APIs next generation communications. Think of companies like Uber, Lyft. Everything that you're doing with those APIs can be done now within a UC or a contact center framework. The choices are endless, the options are endless, and we can do this with very little developer overhead. So I'm going to give you an incoming call flow example, and we'll go through a little bit more of these in detail where we actually have a decision tree for certain use cases. But essentially, your user calls a VBC number, and programmably, we know that that number is a smart number, and that what that's going to ultimately do is it's going to route that through the API, the Nexmo API that we talked about earlier, and it's going to send that workflow that had been pre-programmed to your number into the communications application that it needs to tie into to solve for that unique challenge. When it comes back around, Nexmo then will send the call to the appropriate VBC extension. That will then ring on normal devices, and the VBC user receives the call, and then whatever action you have programmed into it will then be received by that caller. Does that make sense? That's a lot to take in. Good, good, good. Cool. All right. In order to do this, you don't necessarily want to be prescriptive in terms of where information is coming from. And Vonage has taken a very agnostic approach to AI and to our productivity applications. You have a need that's coming from a tool within your environment, whether that be your CRM, whether that be your recording mechanism, whether that be a virtual assistant. And in the world of virtual assistants, some platforms are better than others for certain things. I've worked with insurance companies where they will have a virtual bot that when you call in and you're in a chat session with a bot, the second that you say, I need a quote on car insurance, it will actually defer you over to another bot sitting on another AI platform because it's better at answering questions about that specific use case. So we don't want to be the one that prescribes and says you have to use IBM Watson, you have to use Azure, you have to use AWS, because they all have certain capabilities, and we want to enable any one of those workflows and sometimes multiple workflows to make sure that you're getting the best customer experience. So we're tying into, blank screens. I think my computer went to sleep. Nope, there it is. Smart IVR and virtual assistants. We can tie into things like Over AI, which is actually a company that Vonage just recently purchased. IBM Watson, OneReach, transcription services. So think about now, you're in a contact center environment and you want to make sure that everything is captured within a call environment. Every word that is spoken is now being transcribed by a transcription service and now downloaded into your CRM. In terms of power, in terms of having exactly what was said between agent and customer, incredibly important. Not only do you have transcription services, translation services. You want to have a multilingual environment. You can now translate that call in real time so that an agent who's speaking English can now get translated calls coming into them and they can respond. Agent assist, sentiment analysis, where you're calling in and you can now start to get an idea when certain triggers are triggered by a customer who's speaking to an agent that they're now getting upset. You can now trigger that call to say they've reached a certain score. Let's bring in a manager into that call to run interference and potentially solve that issue before that customer gets so upset that they hang up on you. The uses here are infinite. The platforms that we can tie into are infinite, and it's really important. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples of the types of solutions that we've been asked to solve for. These are by no means the only, but like I said, I think ones that are pretty easily understood. So appointment reminders. So how can we alert customers for appointment reminders to make sure that they can confirm with a keystroke? And this is an example I brought up earlier. When you look at this from a call flow perspective, you have your CRM. It's going to search for unconfirmed appointments. You're now going to retrieve the next number. It'll place a phone call. If it's picked up, yes, it'll prompt you to use text-to-speech, and it'll say, you have an appointment on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Do you accept the appointment? Yes, great. If you don't, if that call is not picked up, it'll determine the DTMF response. If it's confirmed, yes, it'll update the appointment. If no, it'll retrieve the next number and start to go through that entire process, and it'll look for someone to fill those spaces. Yes? Yes, absolutely, yes, yes. One example, it can be filled in with, these are omni-channel solutions. It can be filled in with an email, it can be filled in with a bot, it can be filled in with an SMS message. Contextual call routing. Customer calls in, I'm busy. What can it do? It can offer you options to find me at a later point in time. So if I'm in a meeting, it can provide callback options via calendar integrations or SMS messaging. So this is really providing an additional level of support so that a customer can find you quickly. Customer calls into a number, checks the calendar for an event. If an event is found and there is no event, it'll just call my number. I'm available, my phone will ring. If it sees that I'm in a meeting now, it'll return with our next mode call control with IVR options. It'll either send an SMS, schedule an appointment, or send an email. Now, this doesn't always work. Keep in mind, think of an example now. My boss is trying to call me. It's going to punt him to one of these options all the time. Unless now you can create a boss mode or an angry wife mode where, I'll have a code. I dial 1234. It's a bargain where that phone will ring regardless of my calendar. And so there's things, because like I said, these are always unique. And one thing you have to be able to solve for is all of those solutions. Dynamic geographic routing. So what does this mean? Think of like an urgent care scenario where you have multiple locations within a pretty small geographic area, multi-state, acute care solutions. So what this will do is person calls in, that API now is going to search for your area code, and it's going to say this person is located in central New Jersey, where I live. It's going to route me to the nearest urgent care number, so that way I'm no longer calling into a central number and then being pawned off or getting someone on the phone and saying, oh, you live in central Jersey, let me put you through to the 100 location. It is dynamically geographically routing me based upon my area code, and you can have it do any one of a number of things. You can add an added layer of complication to this. If what you wanted to do, let's use that same example, an urgent care scenario where I have certain locations that can do certain things. Only a handful of my urgent cares will do blood work on site. You can actually have an IVR say, do you need blood services? If they do, you hit 1. It'll then route you to the one within a certain geographic location that actually provides the level of service that you want. So it's not just doing it. It doesn't have to only be by location. It could be by the type of service that you're looking for. This is a repeat. My apologies. I should have caught that earlier. We've talked a lot about building these things out, and I think this is really important because one of the questions I get asked a lot is, I don't have developers on staff. I don't have a team of developers to go and build this out. There are a number of ways to go and build this. So one of the things that you can either build this if you have the resources in-house. There's not a high level of programmer knowledge or know-how that's needed to build these out. We have partner pre-built apps. So there's a lot of partners that want to work with us to solve for unique issues within a vertical market. And so as we're building out this capability, we have partners that want to work with us to build pre-built applications. We're working with a builder studio, and this is really important. So one of the things that we're working on is we have a third-party open source platform. It's called Node-RED. And what that allows us to do is to take any application. So it's open source, and so a lot of people have taken a lot of those third-party applications. They've built out a node. You can physically drag and drop call flows into here. So for a lot of the applications, there is no coding that's necessary. You're literally dragging and dropping the call flow into Node-RED and then dropping it into your communications platform. This is as easy as it gets in terms of the direction that we're going. We want this to be as low code, no code as humanly possible. And we want to make sure that you're not dealing with the SI integrations or software development applications. So if you pay an ISV to go build something like this out for you, the ongoing software updates and the constant maintenance on your platform every time that you change anything within your network becomes overwhelming. This is low code, no code, and it's very easily maintained. Any questions about this before we move on? Nope. This is an easy audience. But what else can you do with it? This is really kind of that open-ended discussion that myself and our product managers have on a daily basis. We were trying to put together, use cases for our sales team, and we get kind of stuck in our own heads of what customers would want or what they can do. But no IVR. We can integrate your CRM for custom routing. You can add in voice bots, local proxy dialer, voice broadcast, so you can alert employees of an important event, whether that be weather related, whether that be an emergency alert, whether that be a change in schedule if you're a retailer. Call tracking, to be able to collect important information about your call and insert it into your CRM. Click to call, so enable a customer's website to be the first to call the business or vice versa. I'm going to give you an example. One of our first customers actually that deployed smart numbers for us was it was a home security company out of the Midwest. And they had a very unique challenge. So they came to, this was a deal that had been in process for a while, and they were stuck because the workflow that they were looking for was causing them not to be able to purchase anybody. They had, think about it, it's home security, so they have sensitive data that's going on all the time. They need to be able to take the call that's going on between the agent and the person whose home has a system. They need to be able to record that call and dump it into a CRM. No problem. Most solutions can do that off the shelf. They had an additional layer of security compliance requirements which wanted to take a snippet of that call, I think it was a 30-second snippet, and dump it into a secondary CRM application that they had. That's where complexity comes in, where you can't solve for off the shelf. With a couple lines of code, we were able to solve this for them and help drive that solution to fruition. So for us, this is something we hadn't even thought through, but when it was presented to us and you get your guys to look at the API and say, okay, yeah, that's absolutely feasible, we can go and solve those issues with very little issues on our end. Any questions?
So this is really interesting, but we have phone numbers set up already that we don't plan on switching?
Yep. So these are for Vonage customers. You have to have a VBC number already. All we're doing is we're swapping out that VBC number with a voice API. The number's the same. The back end of it is a little bit different. And so all you're doing is taking that VBC number and you're making it a smart number. So the physical number doesn't change. It's the capability behind it that then changes. And that's the difference. We're not doing this for other third-party providers. We do this on our own hosted platforms.
So we'd have to switch from AT&T to...
Absolutely. You may want to talk.
I can help you out.
There you go. Just saying, there's someone in the room. Yeah, and so to be able to do this with other third-party providers gets to be incredibly difficult. One of the questions that I get asked is, well, can I just take my UC platform and dump some Twilio APIs over the top? The difficulty of that is incredibly complex because you're dealing now with multiple carrier charges. So from a cost perspective, you're running over two different networks. The ability to go and build it quickly, incredibly difficult. And so that's why, for us, it sits on our own network. There are our own APIs. It's a much more simplistic solution.
And then what do you do for applications that you don't partner with? Like our ERP?
These are not partners. These are not partners. These are examples of partners. We're agnostic in that. And so in the world of APIs in the cloud, you're tying into your third party. We did not have an integration into the recording platform with the home security reseller that I was telling you about.
So like the one use case I can think of is someone calls into their customer center and then that number goes to the ERP and pulls up that customer information.
Yep.
They don't have a CRM system.
Yep.
They just use our ERP.
Yep. It's the same thing, whether it's a CRM or it's an ERP, as long as it can be hooked into through APIs. The list I gave you is not inclusive, exclusive. This laundry list is infinite in terms of what you're tying into. Awesome. So as you're thinking about your next steps in terms of moving to the cloud, clearly this is a journey that I said, every time I get into a phone call, every time one of our sales guys is in a phone call, these issues come up always. Every company, every customer. And when you have those challenges, all I'll say is, challenge the provider that's sitting in front of you to solve for those issues. Most of them can't. if they say they can, it's going to cost an arm and a leg to go and do that. When you start to think about, what's possible, think well beyond just the phone. I think one of the things that people get pigeonholed in is we have a phone system that works. When I pick up the phone, I get dial tone. When I dial a number, that other phone rings and they pick it up, we have a conversation. When we're starting to look now at communications solutions holistically, the world of employee productivity or employee experience and customer experience are so interchangeable at this time that you have to start to think more holistically about what's possible in terms of how your customers want to interact with you. What are the things that you have in-house that you're doing well and you're seeing a return on your investment, but we can make them more productive. And you have to start to think more holistically about your network and your communications as a whole. And I think that's the challenge for customers today, is to start to look beyond the immediate challenge and to start to think about what can we do better to serve our customers and to serve our employees. So that's the challenge I give to all you guys as you're looking at your next vendors. Think about it, challenge your providers, challenge yourself to think a little bit outside the box in terms of what's possible that to make yourselves more productive and to make your customers happier with the services that you're giving them. So any questions about this? I really appreciate the time today. I thought I was going to get a ton of questions on this. Either I'm awesome or I just missed the ball. Come on, Tom. You didn't know this either.